The moonlight reflected on the still water of the lotus pond, casting ripples of silver across its surface. The Buddha sat under the ancient Bodhi tree, surrounded by disciples eager for wisdom to guide their searching hearts. He gazed at the blooming lotus, its petals untouched by the muddy waters it rose from below. "Observe the lotus," the Buddha said softly, his voice carrying across the quiet pond with serene authority. "It emerges from darkness, from mud, yet blooms pure and unsullied, unshaken by the imperfections beneath." The disciples listened, their hearts attentive to every word that carried the essence of timeless truth. The Buddha continued, "Your authentic voice too must rise above the noise and chaos, free from judgment and fear." Ananda spoke, his voice tinged with hesitation. "Master, how can we discover our voice amidst confusion and constant distractions?" The Buddha raised a finger, motioning them to observe the water, calm yet occasionally disrupted by the wind. "Silence," he said, "is the first step. To hear yourself, you must quiet the world within and around you." Silence enveloped the group. Even the cicadas seemed to pause their music in reverence to the teaching. The Buddha spoke again. "Silence is not void, it is fullness, the fertile soil where truth emerges like the lotus flower." He picked a fallen leaf, placing it gently onto the surface of the water where it drifted serenely. "Imagine your mind as this leaf. It finds stillness not by avoiding movement but by flowing with the current." Another disciple asked, "What if the current pulls us to places where we fear to go?" The Buddha smiled, his gaze gentle but piercing. "Fear is the mud in which courage and truth take root." A soft breeze stirred the pond, causing small ripples to spread outward, weaving patterns of connection. "Your voice is like these ripples," he said. "It touches others, connecting them, spreading farther than you realize." Each disciple reflected on the words, feeling the presence of their inner doubts and truths surfacing together. The Buddha continued, "Do not rush to find your voice. Observe, listen, and let it rise naturally like the lotus." Sunlight began to peek through the branches of the Bodhi tree, turning the pond's surface into a canvas of gold. "This moment," the Buddha said, "is where your voice begins. Here and now, in stillness, reflection, and presence." A disciple, Sariputta, spoke hesitantly, "Master, does every person have an authentic voice? Or is it reserved for the wise?" The Buddha shook his head gently. "Wisdom is not a prerequisite for truth. Your voice is born from your existence alone." He gestured to a group of small fish darting beneath the surface, their movements graceful yet decisive. The fish do not question their path. They follow it with trust. Trust yourself as you discover your voice. The pond shimmered as the wind calmed, leaving a mirror-like reflection of sky and trees upon its surface. "Reflection is a gift," the Buddha said, "but do not linger too long on your reflection, lest you lose the moment." Ananda bowed deeply. "Master, you speak of letting the voice rise naturally. How do we nurture this growth?" The Buddha reached into the mud, lifting a handful with his palm open. The mud fell back gently. "This mud nourishes the lotus, yet the lotus does not cling to it. Nourish your truth without attachment." The disciples watched the mud slip away, understanding the importance of acceptance without becoming consumed by fear or judgment. A child from the nearby village wandered into the group, curious but timid, clutching a small flower. The Buddha smiled warmly. "Even this child has a voice, pure and untainted by the complexities we often impose upon ourselves." He invited the child to place the flower onto the pond, observing how its petals floated serenely. "Your voice is like this flower," he said. "It carries beauty without needing validation or permission to bloom." The child giggled, the sound cutting through the seriousness, reminding the disciples of the simplicity of truth. The Buddha said, "Joy too is part of your authentic voice. Do not silence it in pursuit of perfection. The disciples pondered deeply, realizing the balance between wisdom and simplicity, between reflection and expression. Each moment is fleeting, the Buddha concluded. Yet each voice carries eternity when spoken from truth and compassion. As the sun climbed higher, the pond transformed, reflecting the light in countless fragments dancing across its surface. Begin, the Buddha said, by listening, not to me, not to the world, but to the silence within you. The disciples sat quietly, closing their eyes, finding the ripples of truth and silence moving together within their hearts. Another day, the disciples journeyed to the towering mountains, where silence wrapped the valleys like an eternal shroud of calm. The Buddha led them through rugged paths, his steps steady and deliberate, untroubled by the obstacles of rocky terrain. They reached a cliff overlooking a wide expanse of forest, where the wind danced through the trees with rhythmic whispers. The Buddha sat on a smooth stone, gazing into the distance, his presence merging with the serene majesty of nature. He turned to the disciples, saying, "The wind carries a song, not to be heard, but to be felt within." Ananda asked, "Master, how can the wind teach us to find our voice when it is always changing and uncertain?" The Buddha replied, "The wind is not uncertain. It flows with purpose, finding harmony with every obstacle and opportunity before it." He raised his hand, motioning for silence, as the disciples listened to the gentle rustle of leaves in the distance. "Listen," the Buddha said, "not to interpret or analyze, but to absorb and understand. This is the beginning of truth." Sariputta spoke hesitantly, "Master, I fear my voice may lack the strength to be heard, like a breeze too faint to carry far." The Buddha smiled, his gaze soft yet penetrating. "The strength of your voice is not in loudness but in the depth of truth." He pointed to a mountain, peak partially veiled by clouds, standing unyielding beneath the changing skies and drifting winds. "Your voice must be like that mountain, steadfast in essence, yet open to the winds of change and connection." The disciples watched the interplay between the clouds and the peaks, reflecting on their own struggles with self-doubt. The Buddha said, "Doubt is the shadow of truth. It is not your enemy but a guide to greater understanding." The wind picked up speed, scattering small leaves into the air, their movements swift yet graceful in the open space. "Observe," the Buddha said, "how even scattered leaves find rhythm and purpose when carried by the wind's natural flow." The disciples sat quietly, their hearts absorbing the lesson, feeling their inner struggles begin to harmonize with the mountain breeze. A distant bird sang, its voice piercing the quiet, carrying its melody across the valley, unafraid of the vast silence. The Buddha gestured to the bird, saying, "The bird sings not for the world, but for its own joy. Your voice must do the same." Ananda asked again, "Master, does joy always lead to authenticity? Or must our voice also reflect pain and struggle?" The Buddha replied, "Joy and struggle are two wings of the same bird. Both are essential to lift your voice into truth." The disciples reflected deeply on his words, realizing the balance needed to embrace both light and shadow within themselves. A sudden gust of wind blew strongly, shifting the clouds and revealing the sunlit summit of the nearby mountain. "Like the wind," the Buddha said, "your voice carries power when it reveals light amidst darkness, clarity amidst uncertainty." The group moved to a small grove sheltered from the harsher winds, where the air carried a softer melody. The Buddha plucked a grass blade, holding it gently, saying, "Even the smallest voices have meaning when expressed with authenticity." A child from the village appeared, chasing a butterfly, unaware of the profound stillness surrounding the disciples and their master. The Buddha called the child closer, asking, "Why do you chase the butterfly?" The child answered, "Because it is beautiful." He smiled warmly, saying, "Even this simple pursuit carries truth." Do not dismiss simplicity as lacking depth in your voice. The disciples watched the interaction, reminded of the purity of unfiltered expression, free from doubt and worldly judgment. The Buddha continued, "Your voice must rise not to impress but to connect, to carry your essence like the butterfly's flight." The child placed a small flower on the grass, saying, "I found this where the wind left it for me." The Buddha said, "The wind carries treasures, as does your voice. Let it leave something of value in the hearts it touches." The disciples reflected on their own desires to be heard, understanding that true connection comes not from seeking attention but giving. As the sun set, the valley bathed in golden hues, the shadows mingling with light to create an intricate tapestry. The Buddha said, "Every voice, like this valley, is a blend of light and shadow. Together they weave the truth of existence." They returned to their campfire, the flames flickering steadily, each crackle adding its unique sound to the night's symphony. "Observe the fire," the Buddha said, "how each flame dances differently, yet all contribute to the warmth and light." The disciples nodded, understanding how their voices, though distinct, contributed harmoniously to the larger tapestry of human connection. He concluded, "Speak not for approval or validation but to express the truth within." Free and unashamed like the wind, the night grew colder, yet the disciples felt warmth from the wisdom they carried back into their hearts. Another day, the disciples gathered at the monastery as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with warm hues. The Buddha stood near the central courtyard, where a single candle burned, its flame steady despite the evening breeze. He motioned for the disciples to sit in a circle, their eyes drawn to the gentle flicker of the lone flame. "Observe the flame," the Buddha said, his voice calm and clear. "Its light exists not in isolation but surrounded by shadow." Ananda asked, "Master, does the shadow diminish the flame's purpose? Or does it serve some hidden role in its existence?" The Buddha replied, "The shadow is not a threat. It defines the light, providing contrast and depth to its radiance." He placed his hand behind the candle, casting a shadow on the wall, its movements fluid and connected to the flame. "Your authentic voice," he continued, "is like this flame. Without shadow, its light would lose meaning and purpose." The disciples pondered his words, considering their own doubts and struggles, the shadows that accompanied their individual journeys. Sariputta spoke hesitantly, "Master, how do we balance our flame without letting the shadow consume our light entirely?" The Buddha answered, "The flame does not fear the shadow. It dances freely, knowing they are part of the same truth." A soft gust of wind shook the flame briefly, yet it regained its steadiness, continuing to burn with quiet determination. "Observe," the Buddha said, "how the flame adapts. It flickers and bends, yet its core remains unwavering and steadfast." The disciples watched closely, their eyes fixed on the interaction between the flame, wind, and shadow surrounding them. The Buddha spoke again, "Your voice must also adapt, bending to challenges without losing the essence of its truth and purpose." A villager approached, carrying a lantern and seeking wisdom for the struggles weighing heavy on their heart. The Buddha accepted the lantern, lighting its wick from the candle, spreading the flame without diminishing its original brilliance. "Like this flame," he said, "your voice gains strength when shared, multiplying its impact without losing its authenticity." The disciples reflected on the nature of sharing, understanding how connection amplifies the meaning and resonance of their voice. The villager asked, "Master, can one flame truly illuminate many shadows? Or will darkness always remain larger than the light?" The Buddha smiled gently, replying, "Light does not erase shadow, but it diminishes fear and reveals paths otherwise hidden in darkness." He placed the lantern near the disciples, its light extending across the courtyard and mingling with the original flame's warmth. The voice, the Buddha said, is not a tool to conquer but to illuminate, creating understanding and compassion amidst confusion. Ananda spoke again. Master, can we find authenticity in moments when our voice feels uncertain or even silent? The Buddha nodded, gesturing to the flame, saying, even in stillness, the flame exists, holding strength and potential within its core. The disciples considered moments of silence in their lives, realizing their significance as spaces for reflection and growth. As the night deepened, the stars emerged, their light punctuating the dark sky with countless points of brilliance. The Buddha raised his hand toward the stars, saying, each star has its place, shining regardless of the vast darkness surrounding it. Sariputta asked, Master, does every star find its place naturally? Or must it struggle against forces that would extinguish its light? The Buddha replied, the star does not struggle. It burns freely, knowing its place is both humble and infinite in the cosmos. He returned his focus to the flame, still burning steadily, casting moving shadows on the walls of the monastery. To find your voice, the Buddha said, embrace both light and shadow, knowing they coexist and complete one another. The courtyard grew quiet, the disciples absorbing the lesson, each contemplating the interplay of their strengths and vulnerabilities. The villager expressed gratitude, leaving with the lantern to light their path back to the village through the winding trails. The Buddha turned to his disciples, saying, one voice alone can touch many lives, even without seeing the full extent of its reach. Ananda bowed deeply, his voice steady. Master, your wisdom shows how light and shadow weave the truth of our existence seamlessly. The Buddha replied, truth is not a single thread but a tapestry, blending light, shadow, silence, and expression into unity. The flame grew smaller as the wick burned lower, yet its warmth and light continued to reach across the courtyard. The flame does not cling to permanence, the Buddha said, but fulfills its purpose without fear of ending or change. The disciples nodded, understanding that authenticity lies not in eternity but in the fullness of each fleeting moment. The candle flickered one last time before extinguishing, leaving a soft wisp of smoke curling into the night air. Do not mourn the flame, the Buddha said, for its light remains in memory, and its purpose continues beyond form. The disciples sat quietly, finding echoes of wisdom within themselves, as stars and shadows embraced the darkness. Thank you for watching. Buddha's teachings are always with you. Subscribe to our channel and we will see you in the next video.